On Christmas morning, I awoke to the air colored pink, which I took as a sign of coming paradise. Slipping down the hall, I paused and crossed my fingers for luck before viewing the prize that would guarantee my happiness into old age. Amelia lay spread-eagled and snoring on the rug, safely anchored to earth by a toaster and a Hoover vacuum cleaner. Our pitiful tree was tucked against the wall, looking lonely and pitiful as usual. Also, as usual, the room was empty of buck-tweed bicycles. Completely, utterly, terribly empty. I searched the house and yard, confirming the worst. No bicycle. With a few flashy parlor tricks, the old humbug had steered me right into the same old childish quicksand, faith in a grown-up. My disappointment bubbled into anger, and I vowed out loud that Mr. Santa Phony Claus would feel the terrible wrath of the Red Ranger of Mars. Amelia wanted no part of wraths and tried crawling further under the Hoover, but I scooped her up and stomped off in a rage toward the old house on Point Robinson. As we made our way over the fresh snow, out of my mouth poured a symphony of childhood outrage, so fiery in passion, so shocking in fury that it superheated the morning air. Behind me it left a great purple fog of residue wafting across the Vashon strawberry fields. Some say it's still drifting about today, causing panic among the rabbits. We reached the house and I stormed in without knocking. I barely noticed that sheets covered the paintings and walls in the hall. I found the old phony upstairs in bed, but there were others in the room, more elves, a swarm of elves, a flock, a flood, a murmuring horde of puny, pointed-eared old men stood about with their hats off. Although foggy-minded in my fury, I couldn't help but be impressed with such a scene. I fixed a double deadly Red Ranger evil eye on the old man in bed. He breathed with a whistling rattle and opened his eyes when I stopped at the door. "Boys," he wheezed, "the Red Ranger has come calling." Looking at me, he said, "We're having a going-away party, Red. These old friends were kind enough to see me off." His arms rose shakily, outstretched. His eyebrows went high as if waiting for some sort of wonderful news. "Come closer," he said, eyes glistening. "Tell me exactly what you thought of your special bicycle." Oh, I'd tell him exactly, all right. I paused to organize my fit, but as the steam built up and the vile words arranged themselves, a new emotion began to build. Pushing aside my anger, I fought it back, but to my horror, it kept coming. The Red Ranger of Mars, protector of the 23rd century and savior of grateful princesses, faced a new enemy: tears. As I think back now, after so many years, it seems they came from more than just a bicycle beyond reach. But before they arrived, the old man's hand reached out toward my own. Years of brainless kid instinct obscured my emotions, and I grasped it. Even though my brimming tantrum, I noticed it was damp and trembling. His eyes stared at mine, looking for a word of Red Ranger approval. They seemed to beg for it, while old Sounder Klaus was nervous. The sad, failing old man, whoever he was, truly believed he delivered me my Christmas wish. And then up from some unexplored crevice inside me, from a place that I did not know, came something new in my experience. I opened my mouth and watched helpless as it all poured out. The bicycle, of course, that bicycle. Sir, I have never quite had such a glorious machine in all my life. You may have noticed my face actually glowing just now. That was from pride. Using skills gained over a lifetime of telling whoppers, I launched into a soaring account of the adventures I planned aboard a bicycle that I knew I did not have. His eyes blazed to life with each growing fiction, meeting each swoop from the truth with clapping hands and a triumphant woohoo! After I finished, I sat back, winded from the torrent of joyful fibbering. I was feeling strangely happy while it occurred to me that I had no particular reason to be happy at all. "Let's go home," I said to Amelia, who jumped. She hadn't seen me smile before and figured I was having a seizure. As we turned to leave, I noticed that the elves seemed agitated. At the door, I looked back to see several of them trying gently to keep the old man in his bed. Color had temporarily filled his cheeks, and he struggled to his feet. Grinning impishly, he motioned for silence, and then bent to elf ear level. He whispered, "Boys, we're back." The little men looked mortified. Turning to me, he smiled and said, "It's been a pleasure having the Red Ranger call." I saluted and said, "Then I'll call again." I meant it, but that's the last I ever saw of the old man. As I headed for the stairs, he had summoned up the last of his strength and stood at the door, his arms outstretched. "Time to fly," he said. Slowly, every one of the gathered elves gently drifted out of his room and up toward the rafters. The expression on their faces looked similar to the one I'd seen on Amelia's the night before. I pried my co-pilot out of the corner where she was wedged in mortal horror, and we left, my head reeling. I discovered it on the way home that morning. It had been in my front yard all the time. I just hadn't thought to look up. Neighbors had also begun to notice and silently approached. If a dog can look flabbergasted, Amelia did. The morning breeze spun the front wheel lazily while I stared up in open-mouthed astonishment. A shiny brand-new bicycle, custom-made just for me, glimmered in the morning sun, piercing the trunk of Vashon Island's oldest fir tree. It sat there 10 feet up, pointing precisely toward the North Pole, as it would for the rest of all time. So if not exactly a tweed bicycle, but then surely a treed one, placed there by a strange old man whose ears failed him before his heart did. In the days and years ahead, I would think often of how that useless bicycle had been an answer to both our wishes, my own being one I'd never admitted. But on that Christmas morning of 1939, I knew only that I needed to wake Aunt Vi up and tell her how extraordinarily fond I was of an old cast-off pajama top dyed Ranger red. 50 years later, if you ask if I'm not making this all up, I'll say this. The word of the Red Ranger of Mars should be all you need. And if you ask if I believe in Santa Claus, I'll say this. Mind your own business. And if you ask about that tree on a Christmas morning a lifetime ago, the one holding the last little bit of an old man's faith and the first of our sour-faced little boys, I'll say this.